This is The Fit Mess, conversations with world-class experts in the fields of mental, physical, and emotional health. In this episode,
You can't just think your way into, okay, today I'm going to be relaxed. When you have all these imbalances going on and you have all these hormones in a rev state, you have to work from the inside out and the outside in.
now here are your hosts, Zach and Jeremy.
Stress. We all have it. Work, family, friends, pandemics. It seems as if our collective stress levels have seemed to hit an all-time high throughout this past year. And while stress seems like an inevitable, natural response in our everyday lives at this point, it's important to know that it's actually wreaking havoc on your overall health and wellness. Today we're going to talk about the damaging effects of stress and what you can do to prevent them. Our guest this week is Dr. Vikki Petersen. She is co-founder of Root Cause Medical Clinics. She's a certified clinical nutritionist, chiropractor, and certified functional medicine practitioner. So I'm by no means immune to stress. It still affects me constantly. This last year has been tough. But when I think about my relationship with stress, I feel like it has changed a lot since I started this path of wellness or whatever it is that I've been on for the last, as it turns out, 8 or 9 years. I think about how angry I used to get at work about dumb things and how it would just dominate my headspace for days over something somebody would say or something, the way somebody would react to work that I put together that was like I had no control over how other people reacted to me, but I allowed their reaction to just control me and stress me out and drive me insane. And it's so, I guess, rewarding to look back and go, this journey that began on a bike started to ease some of my stress. Found myself in a therapist's office where he pointed out what some of that stress was and how small it really was. And through teaching me meditation has allowed me to just go, oh my God, none of that shit matters. It just doesn't. Like the things that drove me to the brink 8 years ago, I don't even they're not even thoughts. They don't even occur to me anymore. Now it's like, it's the big stuff. It's COVID, it's house payments, it's moving, it's job, like it's finding new jobs. It's the big stuff that matters. And it's amazing how much we let little things just completely stress us out.
Yeah, I hear you. There's still a few things in my life that I've let in that are so simple, are so small, that cause me the greatest amount of stress. And just being able to recognize that, though, and throw them out is so liberating.
Just before we hit record, I got an email from my boss and I was ranting about it. And it's like, oh God, it's so frustrating, blah, blah. I'm already over it. 8 years ago, that email like 4 days from now, I would still be just stewing over it and just like, oh, I just don't understand. So dumb. Like, but when you have the perspective and when you can train yourself to take a minute and pause and reflect on, does this really matter? And that's not easy. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of effort to get to that point. But when you can do that, that's when you can really prioritize which stressors to respond to and how to appropriately respond to them.
So I want to unpack that just a little bit. Because you said, you got on a bike, you started meditating. 8 years later, things don't stress you out as much.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds too easy. What do you think are, some of the bigger contributors to your ability to react and then just let it go? What's the biggest thing, mindset difference that you've put in place that's allowed you to do that?
I think the big thing in all of those tools that I mentioned are they create clarity. My therapist and anyone who's read anything about this kind of work has heard an analogy like this one or this one where so much of our life is just, it's this glass of water that's just, it's murky and muddy or you're walking through a river and it's murky and muddy and every step you take, it just kicks up more and more and it's just hard to see through. So by meditating, by learning to live more in the moment, which is basically what biking taught me, because if I didn't live in the moment on my bike, I was going to die in the moment because something was going to hit me. Just learning to just be present in now, whenever now is, or even now, and being able to meditate and just let all of that sediment settle back down to the bottom allows me to see, what do I really need to focus on? Do I really need to focus on that email? No.
Hmm.
The points that were brought up, I don't have to deal with those for weeks. So rather than sitting here going, well, I better come up with a good answer and I got to respond appropriately and come up, I literally wrote back and said, this is not something I can deal with right now. I'll deal with it when I have time. And like, that's it. I'm done. I moved on, and it's his problem, not my problem. So
Yeah.
I can now focus on the things that I need to do to give him a better answer when I'm ready, rather than worrying about how is he going to respond to whatever answer I can manufacture to satisfy his needs. I don't need to satisfy his needs. I need to make sure that I'm doing what's appropriate for me and alleviating whatever stress that is creating for me.
Again, you speak about it as though it was super easy to do. So it's just I've kind of gotten there myself too. I tried, I read it somewhere the other day, but this is actually the way it works in my head is I feel like I'm at a train station and I'm sitting on the bench, and this works for meditation too. Like, and the trains are going by, and the trains are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then a train goes by and I just get on it. And then I realize I'm on the train, like, ah, shit, I'm on the train again. And I have to get off
Yep.
and sit on the bench and watch the trains go by. And that's, for me, like letting that go is going, oh, I'm on the train. Time to get off. My bench is right there.
Yep.
Let me go sit on my bench again. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I think it's a similar analogy. And I think, you mentioned that it sounds simple. I did mention that it's taken 8 years to get to this point. This is hours of meditation. This is retreats.
Well, what I'm really trying to get at, Jeremy, is how do I do this overnight? Come on.
Well, there are certain psychedelics you could experiment with. I can't speak from experience on them, but I heard they work great. But there are some techniques. There are some breathwork techniques. There are some meditation techniques. There are some retreats that you can go on in a weekend, have a tremendous amount of relief and learn a little bit more perspective. There are some shortcuts. There are also some long cuts, and that's a lot of what we get into with our guest. Her name is Dr. Vikki Petersen. She's co-founder of the Root Cause Medical Clinic, and there are so many things that get in the way of our ability to manage stress properly: diet, nutrition, exercise. I had a chance to have a really in-depth conversation with her about all of them and some simple tools you can implement in your life to be able to start managing those stressors a little better. And the conversation begins with an examination of the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems and how stress affects them in our body.
I like to start with the sympathetic because that is the fight or flight part of the nervous system. And most people have heard of that. So the fight or flight that's the same as the sympathetic. And that's what gives you adrenaline and raises your heart rate and gets blood pumping through your muscles. And so you're stronger, you're faster, you're cognitively better. It's good stuff. And we like it. You and I are doing a little bit of that right now.
Yes.
But the idea is that is not constantly engaged. Now, I've seen several new patients this morning before you and I are talking, and so many people say, at night I can't sleep because my head just keeps running around things. Like I get a little bit, but I know it's not deep, and and they have all these other problems. So when you're not in the sympathetic, especially at night, the parasympathetic comes in, and that's your rest, relax, repair, and digest. So maybe you've heard, don't be running around while you're eating, sit and relax. And I always think of the Italians, they're very good at having a 3-hour meal, and it's like, it's an event, but eating in a rush, it's like, oh, I ate too fast, or I was super stressed when I ate and I kind of felt sick. It's because you were in sympathetic overdrive, you were in the fight or flight, and you weren't in the parasympathetic, allowing you to digest. But it also, as I said, is what you need for sleep, because you get the repair and the regeneration. And so in a nutshell, those are the two systems.
So let's talk about stress, which we've all been under an extraordinary amount, especially in the last year. And I'm looking forward to a post-vaccination world. But I am still stressed about how to sort of not go back to normal, but go into whatever the next phase of life is going to be like this. So I don't know that the stress is going to go away. I think it's just going to take sort of a different approach. So what is that stress doing to our sympathetic and parasympathetic system? What's happening with that?
Yeah, when you're stressed, you're revving that sympathetic, the fight or flight. I mean, that's what stress is. It is unfortunate that the body does not really make a distinction between physical stress and mental emotional stress. So somebody can be, sitting on their job all day long and not somebody who's getting any physical activity, but they have a lot of mental emotional stress, and that's draining them just as much if they were, running a marathon, probably more, because it's a negative type of stress. And it's really what's interesting about stress is like what might be stressful for me, you go, no big deal, right? So you can't really assess for somebody what stress is. It's what's true for them is stressful. So then you get into sleep, and it's like, well, I can't sleep because I'm stressed, and you're in this catch-22. I mean, what I do for a living all day long is getting to that deeper level of why. And with sleep, you look at hormones, and you also look at gut health, because that's where the immune system is. So it's really immune system and hormones, and you're just unburdening the stressors, as we like to call them, from the body. And then you can be left with the stuff that is more lifestyle related, that then you can say, okay, I'm going to make some lifestyle change. I'm going to get some me time. I'm going to, I'm really going to chill an hour before bed and dim the lights and get in the bubble bath or listen to the music I like, or, like you start to do lifestyle changes on top of, my team doing the physiologic changes, because you can't just think your way into, okay, today I'm going to be relaxed. When you have all these imbalances going on and you have all these hormones in a rev state, there's a little bit of outthinking it, but not for long. In other words, what I'm trying to say is you have to work from the inside out and the outside in, so you have to have smart practices day in, day out, but then we really have to make changes internally. And what we've been confronted with this virus is that the people that are doing poorly with it predominantly have these comorbidities, as we call them, the things we all know we're suffering from: heart disease, diabetes, obesity, etc. And these are setting one up for a poor response because we have a lot of inflammation, and inflammation is the root of all degenerative disease. But with this particular virus, that inflammation is setting you up for that, like a hypervigilant response. That's when you get into this cytokine storm that we've all heard of. So it's a cascade. And so it's always been a good idea to get healthier. You know what I mean? Like that's all I do. But with this extra, planetary burden that we have, now is the time. Now is the time to make those steps and take the inflammation down, have a stronger immune system, a more balanced immune system, better diet, lifestyle. It all just feeds in. And then, what patients say to me, and this is, pre-COVID as well, wow, my life hasn't changed. I'm still, a busy person and parent or spouse, and work is the same. But now it's just sort of rolling off my back in a way it didn't before. The things that used to just impact me really hard now aren't. And I feel it's just because I internally am more balanced. And that's true. Does that make sense?
It does. And so I wanted to ask you, I'm not asking you to diagnose me, but you mentioned you do this all the time. So
Yes.
From nutrition, functional medicine, all of that, there've got to be some common things where walking in the door before even seeing the patient, these 5 things are probably top of the list. These are the things that are most common with most people dealing with all of the stress and the inflammation, all these things. Can you sort of give us what are the basics that almost all of us are battling all the time and come to you going, I don't know what to do about this?
Sure, sure. I mean, generally speaking, we start with diet because
Shocking, shocking.
it can, what you're putting in that mouth, food is information. And so I used to joke, like, pre-COVID, I'm in Silicon Valley and I do all these lectures at, big Silicon Valley corporations. And it's like, if you were going to grab a candy bar and, and after the ingredients, it said, this is full of inflammatory ingredients. So you will be moving toward obesity, type 2 diabetes, clogging your arteries. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if it translated what those ingredients were telling your body to do, you give it some pause before you ingested it. And we're not really taught that food is information. We're hungry and we eat, and the place that's closest, maybe we drive through, goodness forbid,
Right.
So it's getting that training of, one of the first things we do with patients was we put them on what's called the modified elimination diet. And that's just a hypoallergenic food program for about 3 weeks. And we're doing testing at the same time. But it's so funny how patients return, and we see patients fairly often in the beginning because there's a lot of changes, and you really can't remember for longer than a week what happened. Like, you can't see somebody a month later and say, so how did that go? And it's like, it's just too much time, has passed. So, they'll say, and maybe they're 10 days into it or 2 weeks into it, and say, wow, like, my bloating's better. And I actually feel like I'm sleeping a little better. And my energy is definitely better. And I think those headaches, I haven't had as many, and they're sort of going through this little list. And then they look at me or, one of my team and say, but we didn't do anything yet. Like, we didn't even get the test results back. Like, we didn't do anything. And it's like, no, you've done a lot. That dietary change was very significant. And that is a foundation that too many clinicians miss, and certainly conventional medicine misses all the time.
That's something that has really been interesting to me. I don't want to be the guy that says I think most people because it happened to me, but until I was really taught to pay attention to how my body responds to what I put into it, I never would have given it any thought. And it seems so odd that it took me until I was 40 to go, what happens to my body when I eat this stuff, instead of just, this is good, this is bad. I've heard this is good for me. I've heard this is bad for me. Shove it in my face and see what happens. But it is remarkable, sort of the lab that our body is, that you can wake up and go, God, I ate horrible at midnight last night, and shockingly, I feel terrible this morning.
Exactly. And then sometimes, because, you've got 23 feet of small intestine and another 11 of the large, 7 to 11, sometimes there can be a delayed response, and that can sort of make people want to tear their hair out. Like, we're really good with treating migraines. And, when I start to say there's often a food relationship, sometimes I get the stink eye coming at me, and they're like, I haven't tried everything I could possibly think of. And it's like, no, I get it, because there can be a cascade of internal reactions occurring before the symptoms. So it's both, but you're absolutely right. We're not trained with, well, this is going to have an effect, and be aware of it, and start to see that. So anyway, to get back to your question, one, what you're putting in your mouth. Two, hydration is a huge one. I mean, there's so many Americans that are dehydrated because they're not drinking enough just good, clean, filtered water. Three, sleep. Sleep is huge. And I was just talking to a patient and just now, and she goes, I need, 8.5 hours, like she's asking for the sun, moon, and stars. And and I was like, the requisite, the sweet spot of sleep is 8, and there's nothing wrong with 9 either. Like, less than that, and you're increasing your risk for cancer and dying. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of great research on sleep, and so now there's the quality of it and regaining that, which we can get to the root of maybe why. But as far as allowing enough hours in the bed is a huge one, because people are sleep deprived, and so they're not allowing that, our friend, the parasympathetic nervous system, to really get in there and repair and do all those phases of repair and regeneration and anti-aging and all those wonderful things. That's when the immune cells come out at night. So that's a huge one. There's exercise. I mean, these are so, the basics, but again, can't say enough about how important exercise is. And you can hear all sorts of opinions about exercise, but from a longevity, keeping the brain happy, there's something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, but it's generated from exercise. And it's what is said is 30 to 40 minutes a day, as many days of the week as you can. So minimally 5, but 7 is great. 6 is good. But moderate exercise, 30 to 40 minutes a day, getting your heart rate up a bit. Certainly if you want to do more and you're lifting weights and, cardio, that's all good. But the sweet spot, like the 8 hours for sleep, the sweet spot for exercise as far as just longevity and cognitive health, not that hard, 30, 40 minutes a day.
Is that a good walk? Is that a 40-minute walk? Is that yoga?
Exactly. Any of the above? It's, the other thing that research says is, it's something you will like to do and you will do it.
Right. Right.
It's strategy number 1. You will do it.
Right.
Do that thing,
Absolutely.
Then we can get into the nuances of a little stretching afterward would be good. And, we want to get the heart rate up a little bit, but it doesn't have to be high intensity. It can literally be a good walk for sure.
Interesting. You mentioned sleep in there, and again, the focus of our conversation is sort of from a stress standpoint. Talk about how stress affects our melatonin production.
Yeah, so melatonin comes in with parasympathetic. They're married. Okay, so when the melatonin comes up and it actually releases the immune cells to come out. And that happens in a parasympathetic state. So that's why, whether it's COVID or any sort of degenerative disease, any sort of infection, we have to have a robust immune system that's cleaning house every single night and keeping ahead of anything that came our way during the day that might lead to an infection or toxicity. And so the getting a strong melatonin level, meaning a deep sleep, is critical. And stress will compete with that because stress is adrenaline. And as I say to patients, like, you can't be awake and asleep at the same time. You know what I mean? You can have a lousy night's sleep where you feel like you're awake, and then you can have a lousy day because you feel like you're asleep on your feet, but you are awake or asleep. You're not doing both. And so, adrenaline and melatonin, it's like this, they're never operating at the same time. And so melatonin is a very safe hormone. I mean, why is it anti-cancer? Why is it anti-aging? Because it engages the parasympathetic. You're getting into that repair, and at night the immune cells come out and they counter infection and they counter aging, and they handle cancer cells, so it makes sense. That's why sleeping pills are so dangerous, because they're putting into an artificial state of sleep, but not getting to the root cause of why you're not really sleeping. So studies came out several years ago now where the prescription sleeping pills are associated with increased risk for cancer and heart disease. Like, of course they are, because they're masking, it's a false sleep. It's not a true sleep. And, you can have different, whether it's an Apple Watch, or I have a Whoop band or a ring, there's a lot of technology out there now where you can start to get an idea on your sleep quality. And it's very important. And if something's getting in the way of that, again, it's immunity and hormones. So, and 80% of immune cells are in your gut. So we say gut and hormones. That's the root cause that we go after. If you're really endeavoring, it's like, I do everything right and I dim the lights and I try to relax and I'm still not sleeping. Like, okay, then internally we have to balance.
So let's talk about sort of some strategies to combat this. We talked about melatonin, and it got me thinking about supplements. And I hear conflicting information all the time about take a multivitamin because it's a really simple way to correct or to make sure you're getting things in your diet that you're not otherwise getting. And then I hear that's probably one of the worst things you can put in your body. So are there things aside from, okay, so we've got our diet dialed in, we're paying attention to how our body responds. Do I need a multivitamin? Do I need more vitamin B? What do I need to put in my body to keep things working the way they're supposed to and make sure I live a long, healthy life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And that's where, the health history comes in as far as what your body has been through. Were you a kid that had a lot of antibiotics, because you had strep throat all the time? Were you a teen that was on medication for acne? Were you just somebody who had a lot of chronic sinus infections? And so again, these antibiotics that have just really messed up your gut, and you don't have a good balance of good bacteria. So you're not absorbing as well as you should. And then we get into genetics, which is pretty fascinating. And you can have these tendencies in your family. All the women have thyroid disease, or there's a lot of autoimmune disease in my family, or, various issues. And that's a real thing. You can have these little defects, these little genetic defects that they don't dictate, the color of your eyes and the shape of your face. We're not changing that. They call them SNPs because they're actually in a on position or an off position. And if on is giving you inflammation, you can actually work a little harder nutritionally and turn them off. You see? So when something is heavy in the family, it's like, yeah, we're all like this, like every man has heart disease. You go, all right. So let's look at some of the weaknesses we have in the genetics and where do we have to work a little harder? So, vitamin D is a great example. You can give somebody the best quality vitamin D and then their levels do not change. And you go, are you taking it? And they're like, no, I'm totally taking it. It's like, it's not changing because they can't turn it into the active form. They just genetically can't. So then you give them the active form, you see? So you might need to jump a step because their body can't do it. So for me in my family, there's methylation. And methylation does hundreds of things in the body, but the major thing it does is, it's keeping this detoxification and your mitochondria, your little energy packages that are in every cell. And I methylate out of a possible 100% at about 12. This is not good.
Yeah, wow.
This is not a strong methylation, right? And this was given to me genetically, but I've worked on my health so well for so many decades, practicing what I preach, never bothered me until a year ago. And then smack, and there's a lot of stress, doing a lot of things, building clinics around the country. Okay, fine. But this is me, this is my normal life. And then it was like, all right, you just went one step too far. Right. And it was like, okay, methylation, what do you need?
Right.
And, molly coddling it with things and now it's happy again. But, it's having those tools to say, so you asked, do you need a multiple vitamin? Maybe, is
right.
Unfortunately the answer. Now, there's quality and there's a huge difference in quality out there. So supplements are definitely a get what you pay for moment. There's no two ways about that. I wouldn't recommend them getting them at a big box store or getting them at a drugstore or, they should be. And I mean, now online, there's so many great products out there, but it is a get what you pay for moment. Same thing like with fish oil, fish oil, getting your omega-3 fatty acids. They're anti-inflammatory and they're so important, but is it processed such that all the heavy metals like mercury were removed from the fish? Because it's like, you're not going to take an anti-inflammatory with a side of inflammatory heavy metal,
right.
Neurotoxin, right? So so these things are, what do I like? I like a great multiple. I like a great C, D, fish oil. And then that's sort of like the foundation. And then what do you need? What are your nuances, based on
Right.
your history?
And it seems like that's something we would need to work with our doctor or a functional medicine practitioner to really do the tests and dial that in and figure out what we're missing.
Yeah. And really find out. It's just, and always say to patients, like, we're going to use some therapeutic doses in the beginning to handle X, Y, and Z, but then we should be okay with just foundational unless we find something that's unique to you. And it's like me with my B12, with the methylation, and I need this very special form of B12, and that's it. We're buddies now. So I ain't getting rid of that B12, So.
All right. So to bring it all back to stress, I know we talked about sort of changing your diet and getting enough sleep and getting enough exercise. Any other sort of final takeaways that you would recommend that are for people that are just feeling the stress of the world, of work, of parenting, of all of the things that are coming at us all the time? What other things should we consider sort of in closing here as we try to reduce our stress and live a little bit more peacefully?
Yeah, one thing we didn't talk about were sex hormones.
Mm.
So, and women can feel this a little bit more acutely. We have two major hormones, estrogen and progesterone. We make testosterone too. Both sexes make all three. It's just very different ratios. But progesterone is the mellow, feel good, relaxed, de-stressed hormone. And literally, when you're under stress, your body will shunt away biologically away from making the progesterone to just make more stress hormones. It's like, we need it over here. We need it over here. We don't care how you're not going to be relaxed. It's too bad. We're just using it so much over here. And so we can get into a lot of anxiety, panic attacks, things where the next thing you know, somebody's handing you a psychiatric drug for your depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not it's not a brain problem, it's a hormonal imbalance problem.
Right.
And so finding a clinician that can balance those. Now, everything we talked about helps, the basics help, but just don't give up. If you just go, wow, I'm just so anxious and it's just unrelenting, there is a deeper reason for that. And not to leave out the men either, but the body has stress. It goes into, we're having a life and death moment. And, the joke in the field is like, well, we don't care how you feel about it. We're going to get away from the saber-toothed tiger and
Right.
to fight another day. And
Right.
We'll talk about how you feel about it later. Right. And so, and of course, the saber-toothed tiger is not supposed to come around very often. So it's not going to create problems. But when you're in that, fight or flight, the sex hormones are going to suffer. And not that they can't be rebalanced, but it's just something that you want to address and not feel like you're stuck with it.
And is that something we can address on our own, or do we need help from a doctor with that?
Well, starting with some of the basics that we talked about with the diet and the exercise and hydration, sometimes people clean up their diet and go, oh my gosh, I can't even believe, if I'd only known, right?
Right.
And then sometimes that will get you a quarter of the way and we still have more to go. So it's very personalized, that's why when patients, I have a YouTube channel and they go, what do you do for blah? It's like, well, 10 people could come in with migraines and I'm doing 8 different things because it's a personalized program, right? For sure. But there is a foundation. There are foundational truths, and that's what we've gone over. And then there's the nuance of the individual.
It's all amazing stuff. It's been great talking with you. Where can we learn more about you and seek you out if we want to get that one-on-one help from you?
Yeah, so the website is Root Cause Medical Clinics, that's with an S.com. And that's probably the best way is to go to the website. So we have a location in here in California, Florida, and then next year in Texas.
Our thanks to Dr. Vikki Petersen, co-founder of the Root Cause Medical Clinic. Lots of great information there about getting your diet back on track, making sure you're taking whatever supplements are useful for you, and just really learning how to manage your stress a little better. And, one of the things that's frustrating in this arena, the space, whatever, when you're working on self-development or whatever, is that it is often very individualized. Whatever needs to change, it's hard to do a podcast like this and reach out to all the people that this reaches and feel like it's going to land for everybody. I know a lot of times I'll read books and there's tons of information in there. And I just feel like, yeah, but I just need someone to draw a map for me. I can't take this general path and apply it to something really simple for me. That's one of the, most stressful things about this work is trying to figure out what works for you. And I think that so much of what we talk about here on this show is that idea of just, for lack of a better term, biohacking, throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, looking at how your body responds, how your mental health responds, and sticking with those things or getting rid of the things that create problems.
And it's about self-advocacy as well. There are basic things that we can all do to help relieve the stress. I'm, going to keep saying, yoga, right? Anyone can go do yoga to relieve the stress. Anyone can do breathing exercises to relieve the stress. And when you get into things like exercise and working out, that's going to be hugely different, right? Maybe you have bad knees. Maybe you have a bad shoulder. Maybe you can't do this or that, right? You have to customize that. And then there's nutrition. Some people work really well with the keto diet. Some people work really well with carbs. Some people it's so different for everyone. So it really comes back to that self-advocacy and being curious about yourself and experimenting with those biohacking things, right? What happens if I remove white stuff like flour and rice and things like that from my diet? And, what happens if I just walk an hour a day? Or what happens if I delay my coffee by 2 hours every day? No. I do that every morning now, and it's amazing.
Yep.
Like I would have never thought to do that. But
and we'll get into that a little bit more next week. But yeah, that has been a game changer for me because I used to drink coffee all day long. And now I have 2 cups because I've delayed my first cup by 2 hours, and my adrenal system is functioning more properly to keep my energy level up throughout the day. It's incredible how a little thing like that terrified me when I heard it, and I went, well, no way.
Mhm.
I can't get past the first 5 minutes of my day without coffee. And now my whole day feels better because of the way that I've implemented that change. So the little things like that are huge. And, another point that I think is important and that I think some people will take away from this interview is that a lot of our problems are in our head, but there are some that come from our physical body. And if we aren't taking care of it properly, if we're not giving it the nutrients that it needs, the water that it needs, the movement that it needs, then that can create more stress and more anxiety and more depression. And so it really is a throw everything against the wall, maybe not all at the same time because you'll burn out and fail, but just start throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks and what works for you.
I'll reiterate that. And there's the basic things that you can do, but just being curious about yourself. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? And it's not all going to work. And, you spent 8 years getting to the point where you can let your stress go.
Somewhat.
To a certain extent, but how
Yeah.
many of the things that you've done over the last 8 years are still with you? How many of those things stuck?
The glass of water analogy at the beginning of the show, that has been in my head for 8 years. When that was explained to me, that stress and all the problems in my life are a murky glass of water that I'm spinning and spinning and spinning around trying to see through it, when all I had to do was just set it down
Mhm.
and it would all fall to the bottom. And that has changed my life.
Right. But how many things are not with you that you've tried that didn't
Oh
work
God.
well?
Yeah. Yeah. Huge list.
Right.
Let me get out the pile of books that are in the garbage.
Exactly. So it's all personalized, and you need to have, again, that curiosity, that ability to fail too, right? Try something. Oh, that didn't work. Try the next thing, because eventually you'll find something that works really well for you.
And you can find lots of things by listening to this show, to listening to other shows like it, reading books. But sometimes you are going to need help. And that's where someone, like Dr. Petersen would be a really valuable resource, or your doctor or some other functional medicine practitioner. Sometimes you will have tried everything and you just need some help, and you need to be okay with asking for it. I guess I just hope that conversations like this one help whoever's listening to try these things and ultimately decide if more help is needed. All right, so with that, we will wrap things up. A lot of the things that we talk about on this show, some of the biohacking tricks are actual products that we actually use. I ordered some myself today that came in the mail. I'm very excited about. If you have heard us talk about things that you want to try and you're thinking, well, where do I get this stuff? We do have a little store on our website. You can check it out. It's in the affiliate section at thefitmess.com. Check it out. We call it the Fit Mess Toolkit. It's just tons of stuff that we talk about here that we actually use, that we actually enjoy. By the way, we aren't getting paid for most of it. It's just stuff that we've tried it, we like it, we put it up on the website for you to buy. So if you would like to, go check that out. And while you're there, please do subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss an update related to the show. And while you're there, you can also subscribe on your favorite podcast player and follow us on the various social media platforms that are available. Whew. That's a lot of words, and I'm done talking. So we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week on Wednesday with a brand new episode at thefitmess.com.
See everyone.
We know this podcast is amazing and doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that Jeremy and Zach don't know what they're talking about, and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.